Gentlemen, what is an absolute red flag a woman can raise on the first date? If she's been using pics of a 21-year online and turns out she's 60. I know this is probably a cliché, but after talking to a woman for a few weeks she decided I was a nice guy and wanted to meet me, so she wanted to come clean. She admitted the pic she used was of her daughter, who was 27. She was in fact divorced and in her 50s. When I said no thanks, I was in my early 30s. She then asked if she could set me up with her daughter, who was coming down to Sydney soon, because I seemed like a nice guy. Said no thanks to that too. Daughter was hot. I am sure she was quite capable of finding her own dates. Closing parenthesis. I hope you don't mind, but I couldn't find a babysitter and brought my kid. Yes I do mind. You could have rescheduled. This is supposed to be a date, not a future daddy test. Here's some money for you and the kid to have a nice dinner. Bye. She asked me to drive her back home to ensure she hadn't left her iron on. 20 years later I'm still checking that she's locked doors, turned things off, locked up the pets, etc. She can't take her eyes off her phone for more than 10 seconds. I was on a date while this shit was happening. Me. WTC get hit again. Her. No. I'm live streaming our date. My ex is watching. Me. Excuse me. I got up, paid my half of the bill with the waitress and left. Making comments to imply that she wants a worshipper, gift giver instead of a partner. If you don't see a so as an equal, it's a bad sign. Constantly bad-mouthing people. Talks about her ex-boyfriend. A lot. This takes me back to the early 20s version of me and a fine lass named Rebecca. We met at a New Year's party. She tall and artsy with some feather arrangement in her hair. I complimented. OOOHHH midnight and a proper kiss on the cheek with the promise of a first date to start 1991. Picked her up for said date a few days later and same hair treatment. She tells me she's obsessed with birds and always wears a feather somewhere. Okay, no problem. She's still cute in full light and this just makes her quirky. Right. I was just a few YRS older and we went to a really nice Italian place near DC. She remarks how nice to be out with a grown-up as she's finishing college and has been dating boys. Nice. Dinner's great until dessert. The whipped cream on mine reminds her of her last boyfriend. She then tells me in great detail how she stalked him, hiding in bushes near his house to spy, effing with his tires and covering his entire car in whipped cream and eggs. Isn't that just the funniest? Check, please. Oh boy, here we go. Long story short, I went on a date with a chick and we were vibing really well before she turned ice cold and began acting like a bitch. At that point I just wasn't enjoying it, so I made up some excuse about having some stuff to do and left. Few hours later she texts me she was disappointed that I gave up so easy and she was testing how much I liked her. Needless to say I didn't ask her on a second date. I'd rather be single, celibate than have a relationship, sex with the entire cast of Mean Girls crammed into a single person with the maturity of a high school freshman. She gets upset at the most insignificant question. Went on a date. Asked her age. Immediate rage. It's rude to ask a woman how old she is. Yeah, I've heard that. I'm going to ask anyways. It saves me from going to jail for dating a 25-year-old who is really a 16-year-old. A girl I dated was really obsessive over her ex, but not like wanting to get back with him. No, good sir. She just wanted to make sure he didn't date anyone, and would force everyone around her to help her, including me. I found out from her ex, a really nice guy, that on the first date we went on, she chose a specific restaurant because he had a date, and she wanted to ruin it. Your well-meaning coworker sets you up on a blind date with her fun friend. You agree to meet at a bar, but then her friend asks you to pick her up because she lost her license. You get to her apartment and she is arguing with a man out front. She flips him the bird before spitting in his face, then gets into your car. It is at this crucial point you notice she brought a suitcase full of her things. After you finish the drink you ordered with your meal, she finishes her fifth one. The entire time you haven't said more than a few words. Not because you're being indifferent, but because she always interrupts with anecdotes about her abusive childhood. The bill comes. She slides it over to you. She informs you that she doesn't have any money and assumed you had intended to pay for the entire date. On the way to the car she informs you that she wants to have unprotected sex. Don't worry though, she tells you that you cannot impregnate her. She is already carrying another man's child. While taking her home she begins gesturing to her suitcase while asking to live with you a few weeks. She is broke and destitute till she begins her new job as a stripper on Monday. The man she was arguing with was letting her stay with him till she saved up enough money for her own place. Unfortunately that man had kicked her out since she was bringing other men over to his apartment to In her opinion it was unfair. After all, she never agreed to only be sleeping with him exclusively. After pulling her hand out of your crotch and telling her you're not interested, you get to the apartment you picked her up from. Unfortunately you live in the same apartment complex. Only a couple buildings around the corner. Far enough from where you park but not so far that she doesn't follow you all the way to your front door. She sexually assaults you while trying to force her way into the apartment. You panic, but then hear your cell phone ring. It's a telemarketer telling you about your vehicle's expiring extended warranty. You pretend it's work, push your way outside, lock the door and hope she forgets the number scrolling across it. She follows you to your car, asking when you will come back home. You leave her standing in the rear view mirror while you speed off into the night. You then spend a few hours sitting in the mall parking lot, waiting for a chance to sneak back home, while on your third cigarette to deal with the second anxiety attack. Even though you previously quit smoking for over 1 year, you come to a grand realization. Your coworker is kind of a bitch. You sound just like my ex-boyfriend. Upon hearing my voice, that is what she said. My brother was in the army when he was set up on a blind date by a friend's girlfriend. Apparently during the first 10 minutes of dinner she was talking about how she would be such a great and loyal army wife, and how she thought army wives were so brave and admirable, and how she would never leave him if he was injured. He had literally just met this girl. He stuck it out through dinner, faked sick and left. She pursued him pretty hard after, but he lied and told her he decided he wasn't really over his ex and wasn't ready for a relationship. He said about a month later she tried to text him with a booty call, and said she even tried to sweeten the deal by saying he didn't need to wear protection because she was on birth control. Like, how many red flags can one girl have? Their boyfriend calls them. When she gets too personal and wants to know the street you grew up on, your first dog's name, what your first car was, where you went to school, mother's maiden name, the 3 wacky numbers on the back of your credit card. I just want to see if we are pin twins. Giggle. Asking if you have ever done heroin, and would like to shoot up later. Unless you do want to shoot up later. Same for doing lines of coke. Shit talking. Could be friends, ex-boy, girlfriends, the service at the restaurant you're at. Had dinner with a blind date. Only saw her eyes maybe for 3 minutes before she was glued to her Instagram and Snapchat, giggling to herself and replying to her followers. Tried to have a decent conversation, but she was like, that's cool, waitress comes. She doesn't even bother looking at the menu. Steak, fries, and a glass of champagne, then out of the blue. How much money do you make? I got up, told her the date was done and left her at the restaurant. She was so glued to her phone, she just nodded. She blows up my phone raging that I was supposed to buy her dinner and exclaimed she had no money or ride to get back to her man's place. So yeah, she was fishing for free food and drinks. She brings a guy from Tinder to the date. His name is Craig. He uses a paperclip as an earring. He spends most of the date sewing. Still wasn't the worst date I've ever had. Starting a small fire in the street in front of your house before the date has even begun. I said I'd be out in a moment. The summoning ritual is really unnecessary. There are a few. 1. She never bothers to engage in small talk during the date at all, and any attempt on your part is only met with single-word answers. Another would be if she kept talking about her ex during the date. Lastly, she answers her phone saying, "Hey dad, this isn't a good time." but you quickly notice the name on the call display oddly matches the name of your own father who disappeared when you were little. Went out with a girl on a blind date and she tried to sell me Amway. Is this some sort of Ligma joke? Am waiting to stick my dick in your ass LMAO. I went to meet a woman from an online dating site and at the last minute she texted to ask if I could swing by her house, which was only a few blocks away from the Starbucks we were supposed to meet at. That should have been a tip-off in retrospect, but we chatted a lot online so I felt comfortable enough. Maybe she just needed a lift or something. Instead, I come up to her house and when she opens the door, she is wearing an ankle bracelet. She begs me to please understand how she didn't want to mention it on the dating site and to please hear her out. I was naturally uncomfortable by this point but also curious, so I sat down for a few minutes in her living room. She told me of this domestic dispute she had with her ex that had turned violent and now she was on 30 days house arrest. A very overweight teenage girl came into the room at this point, and the woman said, "Oh yeah, I also forget to mention I come with this." Now I just wanted to get the hell out of there. I started making excuses to leave but she kept trying to get me to stay. Please. Just one date after I am done with house arrest. The things I could learn from a man of your smarts. I said nothing besides I really have to go. We'll think about it. I just walked out the door and she followed, explaining that the bracelet had a range of several feet outside. I was rummaging for my car keys next to my car, when she grabbed my left hand and slid it under her shirt, placing it directly on her bare breast. She looked up at me with a wicked grin. I got in the car without a word and just drove. I never felt so happy to drive away from a place in my life. So yeah, asking me about red flags may not be a great idea, though hopefully I have wised up since then.